Republican elected officials and right-wing commentators are furious that the Colorado Supreme Court is enforcing the Constitution against their insurrectionist cult leader, Donald Trump. The court ruled that Trump violated Section 3 of the 14th Amendment and is therefore disqualified from ever again holding public office. And since we're heading into the holiday season and many of us could use some joy in these troubled times, I thought it'd be fun if you and I walk through their reactions together and delight in their misery. But before we unpack all of that, if you haven't yet, please hit that like, subscribe, and the alert bell. All right, friends, I've got several clips to play, several tweets to read. This is going to be a lot of fun. But before I do, I just want to clarify something. I'll occasionally get a comment on my YouTube channel or on Twitter, something to the effect of, Josiah, you are so mean to MAGA Republicans and Republican elected officials and right-wing commentators. Why? And the reason why is because I don't believe in double standards and I do not want to contribute to the asymmetry of expectation that allows Republicans to win as often as they do. Donald Trump, the MAGA movement, the Republican Party are unrelentingly uncivil and cruel to pretty much anyone who disagrees with them, including fellow conservatives very often, and liberals and progressives and minorities and marginalized groups. This is the F your feelings snowflake party, remember? And if they can dish it out, they should be able to take it. And if they can't take it, maybe they shouldn't dish it out. But regardless, until then, you and I are not obligated to be kinder than they are to other people. So with that in mind, let's play some of the clips. Okay, this is from the Fox Propaganda Network and Harris Faulkner.
All of the justices on that state Supreme Court were appointed by Democrat governors. But the ruling actually went along party lines. 4-3, 4 Democrats voted for it.
So right there, Harris Faulkner right out the gate is suggesting that the composition of the Colorado Supreme Court, delegitimizes its ruling. And yet as a conservative, Harris Faulkner has no issue with Bush v. Gore, which was the Supreme Court decision that allowed George W. Bush to become president back in 2000. That was on a party line. I'm sure she doesn't object to the Dobbs decision in 2022, which overturned Roe v. Wade. 6 Supreme Court justices voted to do that, and they were appointed by Republican presidents, and all of the justices were conservative. So to Harris Faulkner, it's okay if Republicans appoint conservative justices and then they make decisions, sweeping decisions, based on a partisan vote. But it's not okay for Democrats to do the same. Just an absolute hypocrisy that we should relentlessly mock every chance we get. Here's another clip from Harris Faulkner.
But he handed them yet another gift. On the right, should they take it? And that is to say that you've got an entire establishment president down that has already decided a case for which the president, formerly Donald Trump, has not been charged. He has not been charged in the January 6, 2021 allegations.
No, he has been charged. He just hasn't been convicted. And by the way, he's been neither charged nor convicted of insurrection. And that has nothing to do with the question of whether or not Trump is constitutionally eligible to be president of the United States under the 14th Amendment. And if President Biden has an opinion on this, again, it doesn't matter because he's not on the Colorado Supreme Court or the United States Supreme Court. So none of her complaints make any sense. But we'll continue.
So let's see how it's going to shake out. But in the meantime, directly answering your question, how do they feel? Are they jubilant? Of course they are, because that's less work that they think they have to do. If the courts are going to be on their side until they get to the Supreme Court, we'll have to see what happens. The president's going to appeal. Leo Terrell said, do it now. Time's ticking. Yes. Get it into the Supreme Court's hands right away. But right now, the lower courts are doing the work of those far-left liberals who like to leave comments in your social media. And they're looking at the map, and they're seeing it get bigger of other states that are going to try to keep Donald Trump off the ballot. And I say to all of them, could be your guy, too. There are a lot of people in your party who don't like the fact they want ABB, anybody but Biden.
Okay. If a Democratic presidential candidate has ever committed or does ever commit insurrection after having sworn an oath to the Constitution, they shouldn't be allowed to hold public office either. So that doesn't really bother me. Now we turn to famed constitutional scholar Jim Jordan for his stupid take.
14th Amendment doesn't talk about the office of the president in that section of the 14th Amendment. So I think it's and frankly, the president was put on trial and found not guilty by the United States Senate when the Democrats did their second crazy impeachment of him before. But the scariest thing of all, in my judgment, John, is the escalation with what the left will do to try to keep Donald Trump out of the White House.
What about what you and the right were willing to do to keep Donald Trump in the White House? 60 court cases, which you lost, January 6th, schemes to invoke the Insurrection Act and seize voting machines, fake elector plots. You guys cut out all the stops to try to keep Donald Trump in office into an unelected second term. That's okay, but it's not okay for a Colorado or a state Supreme Court to rule that the Constitution applies to Donald Trump. Just complete hypocrisy. And the last thing I'll say is this idea that Section 3 of the 14th Amendment doesn't apply to the presidency. That's absurd. Again, this idea that the framers of the 14th Amendment wanted to keep insurrectionists out of power. They couldn't be trusted with public office, except the most powerful and highest office in the land. It's like saying, hey, I can't trust you with a butter knife, but here's a hand grenade. Makes no sense. But of course, conservative arguments on this issue are really stupid anyway. So now we have Laura Ingraham, and this is Dan Patrick, who is the lieutenant governor of Texas. This is what they have to say.
Fed up. In fact, seeing what happened in Colorado tonight, Laura, it makes me think, except we believe in democracy in Texas, maybe we should take Joe Biden off the ballot in Texas for allowing 8 million people to cross the border since he's been president. Disrupting our state far more than fed up.
So Dan Patrick is the guy who said during the COVID pandemic, by the way, that we should keep the economy open, even if it kills a bunch of grandparents, because if your grandparents really love you, they'd be willing to sacrifice themselves to keep the economy going. He's, of course, opining what Republicans are really going to do. Listen, if you indict or do anything to a Republican which is earned. So if you prosecute them, if you apply the Constitution to them, like as is the case with Trump, then we're going to go out of our way to abuse the system to target Democrats, this false balance here. Again, I say, if Joe Biden or Barack Obama or Hillary Clinton or any other Democrat who has sworn an oath to the Constitution ever engages in insurrection, then you should try to get them disqualified from public office because the Constitution should apply to everybody. Of course, unfortunately for Dan Patrick, that's not the case, at least not with President Biden. So now we have Jeff Clark. Jeff Clark's not a high-profile figure, but he was involved in Trump's schemes to try to keep in power. And he's complaining that the Colorado Supreme Court used evidence provided by the House of Representatives January 6th Select Committee. He's complaining about that.
It's a mockery of due process, even at due process at the level of what Congress does in its hearings. There was no one who was allowed to cross-examine any of the witnesses. So that's right there, something that's flatly unconstitutional, and then rely on it to keep President Trump off the ballot. And there weren't even minority counsels because there were no minorities appointed by the minority party through the Republican conference. So all you had was the fake tokenism of Liz Cheney, who hates Trump, and Adam Kinzinger, who's a complete lightweight.
So both of those lifelong Republicans voted with Trump the vast majority of the time, as we talked about. Liz Cheney voted with Donald Trump 93% of the time. But of course, these idiotic, dishonest Republican elected officials say that if you leave the cult of Donald Trump, all you ever were was a Republican in name only. I'll also point out that Speaker Nancy Pelosi offered to make it a truly bipartisan 9/11 style commission with an equal number of Republicans and Democrats. But ultimately, Republicans rejected that proposal, and she went ahead with it anyway. That is 100% the fault of the Republican Party. Democrats were perfectly in the right. Now, other things to point out, Tom Tillis, a Republican, he says, according to The Hill, is set to introduce a bill borrowing federal funds for election administration from states misusing the 14th Amendment. So he's upset and he wants to effectively defund the Colorado Supreme Court, which is funny because I thought the Republican Party was the party of states' rights and federalism and, avoiding a tyrannical federal government. Let the states do what the states going to do. Except, of course, if the states do something that Republicans don't like, then use the power of the federal government against them. They're hypocrites and completely unprincipled. You have the chair of the Republican Party in Colorado saying, go F yourselves. That's my sentiment right now. Basically, go F yourselves. That's my sentiment. And he's saying this, he's echoing Elon Musk in response to the decision by the Colorado Supreme Court. Now we're going to scroll through some other examples here. I've got this muted. So Let's see here. This was pointed out. Sometimes it's okay to disqualify candidates. And they point out how in 2016, Donald Trump wanted the state of Iowa to disqualify Ted Cruz from the recent election on the basis that he cheated, a total fraud. Let's see here. Again, the go F yourself one. J.D. Vance said the ruling was unacceptable and even some Democrats thought it was crazy. Let's see. We have the Jeff Clark example. Eric Schmidt, the veil has been lifted. 2024 isn't just an election between two candidates about reclaiming our republic from radical leftists hell-bent on absolute power and control. Stephen Miller, using the left's rules, Biden can be removed from the ballot for orchestrating the border invasion. Biden officials can be criminally prosecuted in state and federal court for their border crimes. Biden's co-conspirators can be held civilly liable for the open border. Marjorie Taylor Greene, America's in a constitutional crisis. The admin is enabling a full-scale border invasion and harboring illegal migrants. The courts are engaging in judicial tyranny. The government's politically weaponized against the people. Soon, national divorce may be our only option. You've got Rudy Giuliani, who's currently trying to figure out how to pay $150 million to two election workers whom he defamed. Jesse Waters said the Colorado lawsuit was filed by a Soros-funded outlet, decided by an all-Democrat-appointed Supreme Court, and the Democrat Colorado Secretary of State. By the way, that's not true. The Secretary of State was actually party in the lawsuit. She was sued by the people who were making the case that Trump should be kicked off the ballot. She played no role in the court. Troy Nehls, this one's one of my favorites. Troy Nehls is the guy who said that the impeachment of President Biden was to give Trump more ammunition in 2024. The guy who said, Trump 2024, baby, when asked, what are you getting out of the impeachment? So he's really upset. He's in his feelings. The Colorado Supreme Court has removed President Trump from the ballot under the 14th Amendment. These justices are a disgrace to our country. The court's ruling is just more election interference. America stands with President Trump. Probably do a separate video about that, but the polling indicates, at least at the moment, that that's not the case. So yeah, listen, the ruling has stayed. It doesn't go into effect anytime soon, and it may very well be overturned by the United States Supreme Court, which has a home turf advantage for Republicans because of the 6-3 conservative supermajority. But I just love the despair and the frustration and the rage. Oh, that's not right. Donald Trump should be above the law, above the Constitution. It's okay to have insurrectionist former presidents try to become president again. Their arguments are laughable. Their principles are non-existent. And again, we should delight in their despair. It's okay. They would absolutely do it if the shoe was on the other foot and for considerably less righteous reasons. So keep that in mind. And please let me know what you think in the comments.